Russell, 45 years old, is a civil engineer who left his career in Chicago to start over in rural Oregon. After 2 decades designing skyscrapers, he decided to completely change his life by buying a rundown farm that needed a lot of work. Raised in a traditional Midwestern family, Russell always followed the expected path: college, marriage, daughter, stable career. Methodical, organized, and reserved by nature, used to planning every little detail, he now finds himself in an entirely new and unpredictable place. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to abandon everything you know for an unexpected fresh start, leave a like for more stories of personal transformation. The 20-acre farm sits in a valley surrounded by mountains, with a faded red barn that dominates the property. A nearby creek provides a constant murmur that replaces the noise of the city. The smell of damp earth and hay mixes with the scent of old wood from the main house and the barn. Every day before dawn, Russell wakes up and makes strong coffee in the rustic kitchen while watching the sky change colors. He spends his mornings trying to figure out how the farming equipment works, often getting frustrated by his inexperience. The afternoons are dedicated to renovating the barn, his main project, where he plans to set up a workspace. In the evenings, exhausted, he documents his progress and setbacks in a diary while his wife Jessica and teen daughter Madison struggle to adapt to their new reality. After 3 months of failed attempts to run the farm, a neighbor suggests that Russell hire some help. At the local market, a handwritten sign catches his eye: experienced farmhand available for work. The next day, a beat-up pickup truck pulls up on the farm's dirt road. Logan, 27, steps out of the truck with confident movements. Having grown up in the area, he has worked on local farms since he was a teenager, knowing the land and its cycles deeply. His brown hair is tousled by the wind, his hands show the calluses of someone who has always worked outdoors, and his easy smile contrasts with Russell's constantly worried expression. "So you're the city guy who bought the old Wilson farm," says Logan as he extends his hand. "I've already heard stories about your battles with that tractor." Russell, embarrassed but relieved to have found help, shows him around the property. During the tour, he notices how quickly Logan spots problems that might have taken him weeks to uncover. While Russell analyzes everything with mathematical precision, Logan seems to understand the land instinctively. Rather than causing conflict, this difference stirs in Russell an almost forgotten curiosity. With Logan working 3 days a week, the farm begins to take shape. Russell watches and learns as they repair the north fence together, reorganize the tools in the shed, and prepare the soil for planting. While fixing the barn roof, their different knowledges complement each other. Russell uses his structural skills, while Logan shares techniques passed down through generations of farmers. In the city, everything has deadlines and instruction manuals, Russell comments as they share some fresh water during a break. Here it seems like the rules are different. "Nature has its own manual," replies Logan. "You just have to learn its language." Their conversations stretch throughout the work, revealing unexpected connections, a shared interest in astronomy, a mutual respect for handmade construction, and a desire to create something lasting. As the weeks go by, Russell notices a growing restlessness inside him. Logan's presence brings an energy that both comforts and unsettles him. When their hands occasionally brush as they pass tools, or when they work side by side in the confined space of the barn, Russell finds himself distracted, his normally organized thoughts slipping away. Jessica starts questioning how much time Russell spends in the barn with Logan, suggesting he should pay more attention to the family's adjustment. "Seems like you found your place here, but what about us?" she asks during a tense dinner. 16-year-old Madison, ever observant, notices the changes in her father, how he's noticeably more upbeat on the days Logan comes to work, how he repeatedly brings up their conversations, how his gaze follows the young man's movements around the property. Russell tries to rationalize his feelings as simply professional admiration, but disturbing dreams and moments of distraction only add to his inner confusion. An issue arises when Logan suggests working on Saturdays as well, a day Russell had reserved for family time. "We're losing you to this farm," Jessica accuses him, not realizing that it isn't the land that's capturing her husband's attention, but something that Russell is not even ready to name to himself. The day started like any other, except for the stifling heat that settled over the farm from dawn. The relentless August sun made daily work feel like a real trial. While Jessica and Madison had gone to visit Jessica's mother in the city for 2 days, Logan and I focused on finishing the structural modifications on the barn. "I think we need to install a few more windows for ventilation," I commented, wiping the sweat from my forehead with my forearm. "This heat is unbearable." Logan nodded, taking off his already soaked shirt and hanging it on a protruding nail. "Agreed. In the summer, these old barns turn into ovens." I tried not to stare at his tan torso, defined by years of heavy labor. There was something about him that attracted me in a way I couldn't, or didn't want to, comprehend. I quickly looked away and focused on the board I was measuring. We worked in silence for a while, only the sound of the saw and the hammer filling the space between us. I noticed that Logan was watching me as I calculated the measurements for the new window, his eyes intently following my every move in a way that made me nervous. "You have an interesting method," he commented as he came closer to inspect my work. "I've never seen anyone so precise with these old things." "Old habits die hard," I replied, aware of his nearness. 20 years of designing structures makes you a bit obsessed with exact measurements. Logan smiled. "And I've always been more of an intuitive type. I guess we complement each other well." The word compliment lingered in the air between us, charged with a meaning that neither of us was ready to admit. Our eyes met for a moment longer than usual before I looked away, pretending to search for another tool. As the day advanced, the heat grew even more intense. Around 3 in the afternoon, the air was so thick that breathing felt like a struggle. "I think we need a break," Logan suggested, coming down from the ladder he was working on. "I've got something in the truck that might help." He returned with a small cooler and pulled out 2 local craft beers. From my cousin's brewery in Bend. The best in the state. We sat at the barn's entrance, watching the property while the chilled beer brought temporary relief. The conversation naturally shifted to our lives, our dreams, our disappointments. "Why did you really come here, Russell?" Logan asked at last, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who'd leave a well-established career on a whim." The question caught me off guard. For months I had given the standard answer, tired of the city, wanting a change for the family, seeking a better quality of life. But at that moment, with only Logan as my witness, I felt an inexplicable urge to be honest. I think I was suffocating, I confessed, the words coming out before I could censor them. I built the life that I was supposed to have, the one my parents expected, the one society approved of. And one day, I looked at it all and realized I couldn't breathe anymore. Logan nodded slowly, as if he completely understood. "I know that feeling. Living a life that isn't entirely yours." "You?" I asked, surprised. "You always seemed so genuine." Only later, he said, a mysterious smile on his lips. "But it wasn't always that way." Our hands rested on the wooden step between us, almost touching. I felt a mounting tension in the air, a kind of electricity that had nothing to do with the storm gathering on the horizon. "You know what I miss the most in the city?" I asked quietly. "Space to figure out who I really am, without all those expectations." Logan turned to me, his eyes reflecting something beyond understanding, a sort of invitation. "And who are you, Russell?" The question hung between us, full of possibilities. For a brief moment, I considered doing what I always did, pull back and hide behind safe answers. But something in that moment, in that place, pushed me forward. When our hands finally touched, it felt like something broke and rebuilt inside me all at once. I'm not sure who moved first. Maybe we both leaned in at the same time, drawn by a force we could no longer ignore. Our lips met hesitantly, unsure at first, but soon giving into the urgency that had been building for weeks. Logan's rough hands, hardened by daily work, cradled my face with surprising gentleness. My fingers wove their way through his hair, pulling him closer as if afraid he might disappear. The contrast between the roughness of our work clothes and the tenderness of that moment created an almost palpable tension. "I don't know what I'm doing," I murmured against his lips, decades of repression battling against the present desire. "Don't think," Logan replied, his voice husky. "Just feel." And I felt. Every part of my body seemed to wake from a long sleep, like a dry land getting its first rain after a long drought. Years of building walls crumbled with every touch, every sigh. We moved into the barn, away from prying eyes. The golden light of late afternoon spilled through the cracks in the old planks, creating patterns in the shadows that danced on our skin. The freshly cut hay in the corner formed an impromptu bed, its sweet aroma mixing with the smell of old wood and sweat. Every undone button, every article of clothing shed felt like dismantling the layers of protection I'd built around myself all my life. I saw Logan watching me with a gaze that mixed desire and reverence, making me feel both vulnerable and powerful at the same time. "You're beautiful," he whispered, and for the first time in my life, I believed those words. Our bodies came together like continents adrift finally reuniting. The heat of his skin against mine sent waves of pleasure through me that resonated deep down to my bones. His hands explored my body with a mix of curiosity and admiration, discovering places even I didn't know existed. Like two violinists in a perfectly tuned orchestra, we found a rhythm that seemed composed just for us. Every movement, every touch was amplified by a connection that went beyond the physical. It was as if we were creating a new language together, made up of sighs, moans, and glances that said more than words ever could. The sun began to set as our bodies gave in completely to one another. Like a summer storm, we started softly only to build in intensity. The old barn bore silent witness to our intimate dance, absorbing the sounds of our passion. In a moment of clarity amid the whirlwind of sensations, I looked at Logan's face, his eyes closed, cheeks flushed, an expression of complete surrender, and realized I had never seen anything so genuinely beautiful. It felt like witnessing a rare natural phenomenon, a privilege to see such total surrender. The culmination of our encounter hit like a wave crashing against rocks, powerful and inevitable. For a moment, the outside world vanished. There was no farm, no past, no expectations. It was just the two of us, perfectly in sync in a moment of pure truth. Our bodies trembled like leaves in the wind as the intensity slowly faded. Logan pulled me close, my head resting on his chest, the sound of his racing heart echoing in my ear. The warmth between us contrasted with the cooling air around, yet neither of us made a move. How can a man go 45 years without knowing such a fundamental part of himself? I whispered, more to myself than to him. Logan traced soft patterns on my back with his fingers, leaving trails of electricity in their wake. "Some rivers take longer to reach the ocean," he replied simply. "But they always do." We lay there as the sky changed color, from deep blue to shades of orange and pink, until it finally gave in to the purple of dusk. The first stars timidly appeared above the cracks in the barn roof. I felt as though each one was a possibility, a future I had never even considered before. Dawn brought back the reality that the night had temporarily suspended. I woke up alone in the barn, disoriented for a moment before the memories of the previous night flooded back. A folded note lay next to me, written in Logan's uneven handwriting, "Went to get coffee. Be right back." I sat on the hay, hugging my knees with my arms like I used to do as a kid, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions inside me. There was no regret, something that surprised me more than anything, but a deep fear of the consequences. As if a dam had burst, everything I'd held inside for decades now flowed freely, too powerful to be ignored or bottled up again. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path alerted me to Logan's return. He entered the barn carrying a thermos and 2 cups, his face lighting up with a hesitant smile as if he too was navigating uncharted waters. "I thought we might need this," he said, lifting the thermos. "It's colder this morning than usual." He sat down beside me, pouring the steaming coffee. Our fingers brushed briefly during the cup exchange, sending a familiar shiver up my arm. A comfortable silence settled between us as we drank, watching the morning light filter through the cracks, creating golden beams in the dusty air. "Russell," Logan began softly but firmly, "about last night." "It was real," I interrupted, surprised by my own certainty. "More real than anything I've ever experienced." His eyes met mine, searching for any doubt or regret, but finding only the newly discovered truth I didn't even know I possessed. "But your family," he said. It wasn't a question or an accusation, just an acknowledgement of the complex web that was my life. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 2 decades built on a partly false foundation pressing on my chest. I need to be honest with them. Like, truly honest with myself. I paused, feeling the weight of those words. But I don't know how. Logan rested his hand on mine. One step at a time. Like when we started rebuilding this barn. You don't expect a solid structure overnight. I closed my eyes, absorbing the wisdom in his words. When I opened them again, I looked around the barn, at the beams we had reinforced together, the walls slowly taking shape, the windows letting in light where there had once only been darkness. You know what I realized? I said with a slowly forming smile. This barn is more than just a project. It's a metaphor for everything happening inside me. I'm dismantling old structures and building something new, something true. Logan smiled, squeezing my hand. And like any good builder knows, it's important to keep what works while replacing what's broken. In that moment, I understood that the challenge ahead wasn't simply choosing between my family and this new side of myself, it was about finding a way to integrate every part of who I am, a father, a former engineer, a man newly awakened to his true self. Jessica deserves to know who I truly am, I finally said. Just as Madison does. And I deserve to live without masks. I turned to face him directly. And you deserve someone who can be with you openly, not in the shadows. A tear slipped unexpectedly down Logan's cheek, and I realized how much it hurt him too, the confident young man who had hidden his vulnerabilities behind competence and easy smiles. Throughout my adult life, he confessed, I settled for scraps from relationships with men who could never acknowledge me in the light of day. I resigned myself to it. Overwhelmed by a certainty I'd never felt before, I held his face in my hands, looking into the eyes that had witnessed my awakening. Not with this man, I promised. Whoever I become after all this won't keep you in the shadows. We spent the rest of the morning talking, planning not only the future of the barn, but also the delicate steps we'd have to take in the coming weeks. We decided to give each other some space. Logan wouldn't come to work for a few days while I started having the hard conversations with Jessica. When we finally said goodbye that morning, our embrace carried both a promise and a mutual understanding. We didn't know exactly how the future would unfold, but for the first time, I was ready to face it with honesty. I watched as his pickup truck drove away down the dirt road, kicking up dust that shone golden in the morning light. Then I turned back to the main house, where soon I would have to face the hardest task of my life. But as I walked, I realized that my steps felt lighter, my shoulders less burdened, as if I had let go of an invisible weight I'd carried for decades. The barn stood behind me, a silent witness to a transformation that went beyond its wooden walls. Like it, I was being rebuilt, keeping the essential parts of who I've always been while embracing newly discovered truths about myself. Jessica returned with Madison the following afternoon. I watched the car climb the farm's dirt road, my heart racing with each meter it closed in on us. I had rehearsed this moment mentally for the past 24 hours, but no rehearsal could ever prepare me for the conversation that was coming. Madison was the first to get out of the car, her teenaged face lighting up when she saw me. "Dad, Grandma sent you apple pie," she shouted, holding a cardboard box like it was a trophy. I hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, aware of how my decision would affect her life. Jessica got out next, her face tired from the trip but with a shy smile on her lips. "Was your mom's house as hot as here?" I asked while helping her with the bags. "Worse. At least here we have the creek," she replied, glancing around. "Has the barn made any progress while we were gone?" The mention of the barn brought a warm flush to my face. "Yes, a lot," I managed to say. "Can we talk after Madison goes to bed?" Something in my tone must have set off an alarm for Jessica because she looked at me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Sure. Are you all right?" "We just need to talk." The night dragged by agonizingly. We ate dinner on the porch to escape the stifling heat inside the house, with Madison entertaining us with stories about her grandma and cousins she'd seen in the city. I watched Jessica during the meal, how she laughed at her daughter's jokes, the way she mechanically brushed her hair away from her eyes, small habits that had become part of my life for nearly 2 decades. Finally, Madison announced she was exhausted and went off to her room. Jessica started clearing the plates when I gently touched her arm. "Let's leave that for later. How about we take a walk down to the creek?" The path to the creek was lit only by the full moon and the fireflies that dotted the fields like fallen stars. We walked in silence for a few minutes, the sound of running water growing louder as we got closer. "Remember when we bought this property?" I finally asked. "You said I looked more alive just walking on this land." Jessica smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You really did, like a kid getting the gift you always wanted. It was the first time in years I saw you truly excited about something." We sat on a large rock by the creek, the water, silvered by the moonlight, sliding over smooth stones and submerged twigs. "Jess, I've been living a life that isn't entirely mine," I began, the words coming out with difficulty. "When we came here, I thought it was just the city, the job, the routine that was suffocating me. But I've discovered something much deeper." She turned to me, her face partially shadowed. "Russell, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of almost 50 years of denial. Something happened that made me confront truths about myself I've always ignored. Truths about who I am, about my feelings. "It's Logan, isn't it?" she asked softly. The question left me speechless. Jessica nodded slowly, a lone tear sliding down her cheek. "How?" was all I could manage. "Russell, we've been married for 18 years. Do you really think I didn't notice the way you look at him? The way your voice changes when you talk about him? The way you are when he's not around to work?" She wiped away her tear with the back of her hand. "At first, I thought it was just admiration, maybe a strong friendship. But then I began to recognize that look because it was the same look you used to give me in the beginning." The silence that followed was filled only by the constant murmur of the creek and the distant chirping of crickets. I tried to find words to deny, to explain, to justify, but only the truth felt right in that moment. "Jess, I loved you, I still love you, in the most sincere way I know. I never meant to hurt you." "I know," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears. "I also know you've never been able to give me all of yourself because there were parts of you even you didn't fully know." Her words hit me like a wave. For years, I'd feared that admitting my truth would completely betray everything we'd built. I never imagined that Jessica might already have seen parts of me that I'd kept hidden in the shadows. "What happened between you two?" she asked, not with anger but with a painful curiosity. "Last night, while you were away." I hesitated, unable to put it into words. "I understand," she said, sparing me details that would only cause more pain. "And now?" At that moment, I realized I didn't have a clear plan, only the certainty that I couldn't live divided anymore. "I don't have all the answers. I only know that I have to be honest, with myself, with you, with Madison. You deserve someone who can love you completely, not just with the parts they're willing to share." Jessica looked at the moon reflecting on the flowing water, deep in thought. "You know, when Madison was born I promised myself I'd do anything to make sure she grew up knowing exactly who she is and being proud of it." She turned to me. "How could I expect any less from you?" Her words hit me with unexpected force, tears I hadn't known I was holding finally finding their way down my face. "You've always been stronger than me," I whispered. "It's not about strength, Russell. It's about truth." She held my hands in hers. "This is going to hurt. It's going to be confusing and difficult, especially for Madison. But we'll still be a family, just different from what we planned." We stayed there for hours, talking about the practical and emotional details of what was coming next. We decided that I would sleep in the guest room while I prepared for the difficult conversations ahead. Jessica suggested that maybe it would be best for her and Madison to go back to Chicago, giving both of us space to process, though the farm could still be a place for us to gather, maybe during holidays and summers. "And what about Logan?" she finally asked as the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. "Honestly, I don't know," I replied. All I know is that I need to figure out who I am before I can offer anything real to anyone. When we returned home, exhausted but somehow feeling a little lighter, Jessica stopped on the porch and looked at me with a mix of sadness and acceptance. "Russell, promise me one thing. Anything. Be happy. Truly, completely happy. Otherwise, all this suffering won't have been worth it." In that moment, I realized that what I had seen as the end of something was actually an act of deep love, Jessica setting me free to find my own truth, even if it meant losing her as a wife. 3 weeks passed since that conversation by the creek. Jessica and Madison returned to Chicago to sort out the transition, allowing Madison to start the new school year with her friends while adjusting to all the changes. The house felt strangely quiet without them, but the silence gave me room to reflect and process. Logan respected my request for distance during that period by sending only occasional messages to check in. His patience and understanding only confirmed what I was starting to feel, that what we had was deeper than a fleeting moment of passion in the barn. Today, finally, I asked him to come to the farm. Not to work, but just to talk. As I waited for him to arrive, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the barn that had become a symbol of my transformation. The sound of tires on the gravel road announced his arrival. Logan parked the pickup in the usual spot but hesitated before stepping out, as if uncertain about the rules of this new territory between us. When our eyes met, I felt a calm and excitement at the same time, a contradiction I was beginning to accept as part of who I am. "Hey," he said simply as he stepped up onto the porch. "Hey," I replied, offering him the chair next to me. "Coffee?" Logan accepted the cup, his fingers brushing against mine for a moment. We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the slowly drifting clouds in the blue September sky. "How are you?" he finally asked in his gentle voice. "Surprisingly, good," I replied, realizing deep down it was true. "Different. Lighter, despite everything. Like I finally stopped fighting against a force that was always too strong to resist." Logan smiled, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "And Jessica? Madison?" "Jessica has been amazing, more understanding than I deserve. Madison is confused, hurt, but we're really talking for the first time." I paused, feeling both the weight and relief of this newfound honesty. I told her I've been discovering parts of myself that I ignored for so long, and that it doesn't change how much I love her. "And what about us?" Logan asked, the question that had been hanging between us since that night in the barn. I turned to face him completely. "Logan, I need to be honest. I don't know exactly what the future holds. I'm at the beginning of a journey of self-discovery that should have started decades ago. But I know I want you to be a part of it." I extended my hand, linking my fingers openly with his, unafraid of who might see. "I can't promise it'll be easy. I'm still learning the language of who I really am. But if you're willing to be patient, I'd like to see where this takes us." The smile lighting up his face made every difficult moment of the past few weeks worth it. "Russell, I've spent my whole life waiting for someone who isn't afraid to face their own truth. I can wait a little longer while you figure it out." I stood up, pulling him to join me. Without hesitation, I leaned in and kissed him gently, our first kiss in the daylight, with no shadows or hiding. "The barn still has a lot of work to do," I said, looking at the half-renovated structure. "I thought maybe we could finish it together. One step at a time." "One step at a time," he agreed, his smile reflecting mine. As we walked side by side toward the barn, I realized that the farm, which I'd initially bought as a refuge, had become the place where I finally stopped hiding. I don't know if I'll stay here permanently or if new paths will open up, but for the first time, I'm following a truly internal compass. The journey that begins at 45 is no less meaningful than the one that starts at 20. In fact, it might be even more precious, because every moment of genuine authenticity was hard-won against decades of denial. If someone had asked me a year ago where I'd be today, I'd have never imagined this scenario: learning to be a distant father, ending a marriage with mutual respect instead of bitterness, and opening up my heart to possibilities I'd never allowed to exist. But here I am, rediscovering myself in the reflection of a man who had the courage to see me when I couldn't even see myself completely. The sun shines brightly on the barn's roof, which now stands as not just a project but as a promise, to me, to Logan, and to everyone I love, to live out the rest of my days in the light of truth, no matter where it takes me. If my story resonated with you in some way, I hope it gives you the courage to face your own unspoken truths. It's never too late to discover who you truly are. Sometimes the hardest path is the only one that leads to true happiness. Leave a like and subscribe for more stories about personal discoveries at any age, because life doesn't wait for us to be ready to learn its most important lessons.